Welcome everyone to the Post-IDFA changes and new reality for game developers panel. We're super excited to have you join us. We have a panel of experts today to talk about one of the biggest topics, I think, of the last maybe year. We're gonna talk about a lot of things. We're gonna talk about what happened to IDFA, how does this affect advertisers, publishers, and if you're a gaming developer, what should you do now to prepare, basically? Definitely a lot to cover, a lot of interesting points from our panel of experts. It's gonna be awesome. So I'm Eran Friedman. I'm your host for today. I'm the CTO and co-founder at Singular. I'm coming from the MMP and attribution space, and I'm gonna be the moderator for today. So let's start by introducing our panelists. Matt, would you like to start?
Hi there. So I'm Matt Baker. I look after lead the sales, publisher sales for Western Europe for Fyber. And if you're not familiar with Fyber, we are a mediation platform and an SSP.
Awesome. Christian, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Christian, the CEO of AudioMob, and we provide non-intrusive audio ads for mobile games.
Awesome. Emma?
Hey, I'm Emma Raz. I'm the commercial director of NumberEight, and what we do is basically we use ID-less contextualization in order to optimize ad revenues.
Awesome. And Paul?
Hey, my name's Paul Bowen. I'm general manager of AlgoLift. We predict LTV for mobile apps, and then we automate user acquisition using those LTV predictions.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So definitely we have panelists from across the industry. I'm going to talk about everything iOS 14 today. So I'm going to stop the slides right now and just so everyone can see our faces. And we're going to go straight to the topic. So Matt, maybe you can help us kind of set the stage and talk exactly what exactly happened in iOS and what does it mean for game developers?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll try and give a broad overview, and perhaps if anyone else needs to jump in, then please do. But with iOS 14 or 14.5 specifically, what we're talking about here, all of the conversation is around the introduction of Apple's App Transparency Framework. You might hear us kind of more commonly referred to as ATT. This is designed to Apple's put this in place to give the user more control as to kind of where and by whom you could be tracked on your mobile device. So basically for monetization teams, it means in reality, for game developers, you're going to need to show prompts to your users, which will allow them to opt in or out of tracking, very specifically kind of whether they can receive the IDFA or not. And then for UA teams, there's a whole new attribution methodology that's been introduced, which is called SKAdNetwork, which replaces user-level attribution with an aggregated conversion tracking system.
Awesome. Yeah, and definitely a lot to cover there. It sounds like a lot of implications, both for the advertising side, the monetization side, for sure. Yeah. Emma, anything else to add to that context, maybe?
Probably the biggest change, but this has been happening for a while. So the whole moving towards privacy. However, unlike GDPR, where we had a lot of control of how things are being shown and the developers can control the text that the user is going to see, with ATT Prompt 1, developers cannot change the text. Apple controls the text, and you can add a pre-prompt, or you can add the app name, but that's about it. In addition to that, you can only show the prompt once. So if they say no, that's it. It's for life, and you're stuck with it. So that's the biggest change from previous regulations and guidelines. That is just a lot more strict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely it sounds very dramatic when you have one shot at every user in your app to get their permission, and that's it. So I'm sure it's going to be a big deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so maybe we can dive in a bit to kind of the implication. What exactly does it mean to each kind of side of the ecosystem? So I'll pass it maybe to Christian now from the advertiser side. Maybe you can walk us through exactly how does this affect kind of the user acquisition side, targeting, anything on these regards?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we do at AudioMob is providing incremental revenue through contextual advertising, right, through non-intrusive audio ads. And it's something that we look at a lot when we are doing, revenue tests. And one of the core things fact that all these advertisers that are gaming advertisers that are looking to acquire users. And to acquire a user, we see two distinct methodologies. One being, hyper casual games that can afford more broad stroke UA targeting initiatives. But then when it comes to, let's say, mid-core games, especially ones that have in-app purchases, we all know that it's a small segment of users that you really need to target, the whales, the ones that are bringing in the majority of revenue. And when iOS 14 launched and a lot of people decided to opt out, the attribution mechanism is effectively severed, which means that using that ID in order to target the high spenders so that you can bring them into your mid-core game is much more difficult. So that's the kind of thing that we're seeing across the space, which is why we're getting involved to provide that cushion of contextual revenue.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like one of the biggest implications are for companies that are very focused on those whales, and sounds like it's going to be major for them in regards to targeting. Emma, anything to add there maybe around these areas?
I mean, Christian actually mentioned it. Like Christian did a really great job explaining it. So what you're seeing right now is a decrease of addressability. That is exactly, you can't identify the whales and dolphins. The next thing, the next thought is, how do we then, we redefined whales and dolphins. How do we identify them if we don't have IDs? And that is rethinking of them through what we know about them, through contextualization, through information that is anonymous, but is still enough so we can target them in any way that is still effective. And probably I would recommend also to be slightly cautious of the whole cheap UA promise. There is a lot of talk right now about LAT traffic is cheaper, therefore you manage to maintain your ROAS, which is it's always really fun to hear, oh, you can get a user for half the price, it's like a sale, but it's not sustainable in the long run, and it's not going to be effective in the long run. So we need to be a bit cautious as an industry and really understand what it means, and just try to understand our users a bit better. So instead of ID, what else can we use?
Interesting. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so maybe now that we've covered the advertising side, maybe we'll go to the other side of the landscape for the monetization and publishing. And I direct the next question to you, Matt. If you can kind of talk through about what are the implications also from monetization itself. What should publishers expect to see in the next few months?
I guess the implication, we've already covered this, right, is the publishers that are expected to kind of introduce this ATT prompt to users. So we're seeing some publishers kind of experiment with different language on pre-prompts to try and entice kind of opt-in to those to the kind of the LAT kind of prompt that kind of precedes that. But I think just broadly speaking, over the next few months, there's going to be a lot of change, right? So from the network side, there's going to be a lot more kind of requests for kind of changes to SDKs, kind of as the networks kind of learn and optimize, introduce new kind of techniques. I think from a monetization standpoint, we're probably expecting, I think it's realistic to expect we are going to see kind of lower CPMs for limited ad tracking traffic, but we do expect those will creep up over time as kind of more buyers come into the fold and people kind of learn how to handle this traffic better.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like it connects with kind of the cheaper UA promise that might be unsustainable and later on, as you're saying.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think in terms of kind of timelines, I think I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit later on, but it's still very early days at the moment as well. So I think broadly speaking, we're only seeing about 15% of kind of users that are actually adopted iOS 14.5. So anything that we see right now is just really kind of a guess at kind of what it's going to kind of extrapolate to. But I think in terms of timelines, we probably expect kind of mid to late June before we see kind of the full adoption of iOS 14.5.
Interesting. Yeah. Emma, what do you think from your side? Do you see the same from the monetization side?
We're probably seeing the same in terms of adoption rates, which is also part of the reason why there are so much variations. If you look at ATT opt-in, you see many reports, some of them state 4 4% of the users opt in, some say 45% of the user opt in. So part of it is because there's such a low rate of adoption, which kind of slows down the impact on the industry, which is good for us in terms of like, okay, it will give us some time to adopt and change and kind of get used to this. However, there's some rules of math that cannot be broken. If people are paying less for impression, then you publisher makes less for impression. There are some rules of just basic math that cannot be changed. So it will be more of a question of how the industry will adapt to it. Because we can either go down that path of the monetization, advertising on that will become more competitive, so people will spend more, but conversion will stay low, and that probably will affect the whole ROI balance. And then we can either rethink of the whole how we monetize apps in the first place, or option number 2 is rethink of addressability and find new ways to target users that help us maintain basically maintain the same effectiveness and the same KPIs for advertisers while still keeping revenues up. So there's basically 2 possible developments. Hopefully we'll find a solution which is sustainable, because that means that we don't need to get back to the drawing board and redraw economies, but I guess time will tell.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely it's going to be interesting to see how things develop in the next few months. Okay, so Paul, let's turn it to you. Definitely a lot of changes, and I'm sure there's a lot of technology building sides that we needed to kind of address. What are the main investments and tech changes that you've made on your end to prepare for these changes?
Yeah, so AlgoLift predicts LTV at the user level and uses those LTV predictions to understand long-term campaign performance. So, we aggregate user level predictions up at the campaign level or at the channel level. So with the effective deprecation of IDFA, that becomes impossible, right? So we can't measure the long-term performance of those campaigns. So we've done a couple of things. Firstly, we've built a campaign measurement model for SKAdNetwork campaigns, and effectively what that does is allow advertisers to understand the long-term returns of their SKAdNetwork campaigns. So when you don't have the IDFA to join a click with an install, you can still measure the long-term performance of your campaigns. So to sort of build that model, we did a couple of different things. One was we needed to ingest new data sets. SKAdNetwork comes with a bunch of new data that is important in terms of post-install performance. So ingesting the conversion values at the user level when they're set. So when the device sends them to the ad network, that's a piece of data that we're now collecting. We're also collecting the postbacks from the MMPs. That allows us to fuel our probabilistic attribution model. And then we've also built a automated algorithm to output the optimal conversion value. So basically what we do is look at the LTV curve of an app and then map D0 events to LTV. And we have an automated algorithm that basically determines the optimal definition of conversion value. So that's the other investment that we've made. So we can sort of spit out conversion values very quickly based on LTV predictions, which is pretty cool, because I think defining conversion value is probably one of the harder things that advertisers have to tackle right now. Which of my D0 events, which should define, the D0 thing is really what Facebook has pushed the industry towards. So what are those D0 events map to my LTV, and that's something that we have sort of automated using our technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So the conversion models are a challenge on its own, and definitely I've seen a lot of content discussions on how to utilize them the most. So for sure. Okay. Maybe on the Matt, on the mediation side, what type of technology investments have you been doing?
Yeah, of course. So I think we've the obvious steps we've taken, right? So to update SDKs to support iOS 14.5 and SKAdNetwork specifically. With that, we've had to update Exchange APIs to again support SKAdNetwork, and a whole host of new OpenRTB extensions for a set of contextual parameters which we built. So on that one, we've kind of done a lot of effort. We put a lot of effort into kind of building out the data sets that we pick up from the devices using our SDK to make sure that we're kind of putting as much data in the hands of buyers as possible. So things that we previously weren't passing before or not supported as part of OpenRTB. Some examples like kind of whether the user is in battery saver mode, what the session depth is, so how many ads the user has already seen, whether the user is a previous clicker, available disk space, all of this stuff that we think are going to be really important buying signals for our buyers. So we've kind of not only kind of built out those parameters, but we've had to do a lot of work with building out extensions for the OpenRTB spec as well to kind of support those. I think longer term, we're kind of starting to look now around how we can support publishers to kind of ingest first-party data and kind of provide that to buyers in a standardized way as well. So that's early days for that. So we've kind of laid the groundwork with the kind of contextual work that we've been doing, but we're looking to bring in that first-party data and kind of start passing that on through the pipes that we have available.
Okay, sounds like a lot to do. Okay.
Been a busy year for sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think one of the kind of more common questions that we've been asking, and we've been kind of hearing from advertisers and publishers, are what are kind of the early learnings and data points that we see, especially we're at about 1 month after iOS 14.5 was officially released. So I'm wondering if kind of people have any interesting learnings and insights from kind of the real data. So Emma, maybe we can start with you. Any interesting learnings since 14.5 got out?
Well, we are not, so we don't run campaigns. We're not an ad network. We are the people kind of in between. And what we do is we basically use the data that we see on the device, calculate everything on the device because we use edge computing, and then identify the audiences. So what we're seeing mostly is how even the response of how people are addressing or are able to consume information. So for one, both media agencies and brands are slightly late in the preparation. They were so busy with cookies being phased out that they're almost now, okay, so this is happening. We need to now figure out what we're doing with this. And that is not as serious for DSPs, but they are having a bit of a challenge with understanding how they can actually target anonymous data. It's part of what we do and what we specialize in, because we take a bit of a different approach. We don't send the raw data, but we actually try to do all the analysis on the device and send only the cohorts and only the more behavioral based insights. So like, let's say people that are joggers, or if you are right now stuck in traffic, things like that. And that is part of the whole trying to bridge between how the buy side is used to buying and how what kind of information we can actually extrapolate from the app itself, and what is contextualization within the app. And the same kind of situation is happening with omnichannels. So omnichannels such as audio are also a bit more traditional, and therefore they haven't been as prepared, or were busy dealing with other issues such as the cookie phasing out. And it's now almost like a double whammy, like IDs are going away, cookies are going away. How do we target? What do we do now? Because they heavily relied on DMPs that are no longer, they can just no longer work, not in the same way they have before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So same question to you, Paul. Any learnings that you see, or any interesting data points from the first few weeks?
Well, yeah, I think we've already covered the penetration, or sorry, the opt-in rate. The penetration of iOS 14 and the opt-in rate. So I think we're at roughly sort of 15% now. So it's still pretty low. And the other real driver around sort of lack of data here is that most advertisers, especially on non-self-attributing networks, are using fingerprinting still to measure the performance of their campaigns. So there is a lack of data. I think there's also a reticence to spend on SKAdNetwork when you have an alternative. So if you're able to use fingerprinting, why would you spend on SKAdNetwork campaigns, with less certain results? There is one data point that I have. There was an advertiser so AlgoLift is owned by Vungle, and there was a advertiser on the Vungle network who who stopped using probabilistic attribution, fingerprinting, and moved fully to scan attribution. And they saw a 52% drop in IPM when they moved fully to SKAdNetwork. So that's a pretty significant drop in their IPM. They also saw a 94% increase in their CPI at the same time. So that gives some indication of the world that we may be in when Apple pushes out 14.6 and forces the update on that. Concerning results, that's obviously a fairly unoptimized campaign right now. That's very early results, but when we don't have that IDFA to optimize campaigns, it becomes much more challenging.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sounds like pretty extreme results. And I think in iOS 14.5, I think that Apple only just now added the view-through support, which I think probably, hopefully, would increase the IPM in a sense. So maybe we can be optimistic that at least it's going to increase later on. But yeah, definitely concerning. Okay, maybe we'll keep it with you, Paul. And now we're talking about kind of ATT and the probabilistic. But if we focus really on the SKAdNetwork still, how do you see in general the adoption of SKAdNetwork and the conversion models? Do you feel that advertisers are generally ready with it, or to what extent? You gave kind of the example, but when you look at broadly in the industry.
I mean, I don't have quantitative data, but generally, no, I don't think anyone's still ready. People are still working on their conversion values now. Even some of the biggest advertisers that I'm having conversations with, and they're still thinking about what should I do. Some of them are just using very simplistic models, so payer, non-payer as a model. Facebook historically has compressed payers into conversion values into payers, non-payers. They're becoming more complex. I think what the industry has lacked is real leadership around areas, and so there is no standardization around conversion value. Everyone's making it up as they go along. I foresee that we'll converge on some optimal solutions for different sort of verticals and different monetization types, but right now it's pretty much the Wild West. And I guess AlgoLift's view is in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, and so that's really what AlgoLift is helping advertisers do. Really help to find that optimal conversion value and to understand that long-term ROAS of their campaigns. Because right now it's the Wild West.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay, we're almost out of time, but one of the things we wanted to cover in the session is also to provide kind of the final goodie bag, the key takeaways that every advertiser and publisher should know now if you're a gaming developer. So we do kind of a quick round by our experts and kind of ask what should each one do. So maybe we'll start with kind of the advertiser side. What should advertisers do right now to prepare? Emma, would you like to start?
Sure. So as I said, be very critical of cheap UA. It's not that cheap. So probably think about it before you buy. First-party data is your friend and it's fundamental. So I would invest in it, and I will get to know your whales and dolphins and anyone, get to know your users really well. There are other ways to target them. You just need to know who they are. And then don't be afraid to try new things, whether that's being ad formats. Christian is right here, and AudioMob is amazing. So don't be afraid of trying new things like audio ads and in-play and new targeting options. We need to be creative and we need to be a bit brave, and hopefully we'll get there.
Okay, Matt, some questions. What should advertisers do now?
For me, we're in this really fortunate kind of window where we have a slow take-up of iOS 14.5, right? But we also have all of the contextual parameters. We're kind of presenting IDFA to kind of advertisers. So we have this nice kind of handy kind of crossover window. So for me, it's just about kind of taking as much learnings as possible during that window to identify which contextual signals are the right signals to be looking at while we still have the IDFA present. So for me, it's kind of making the most of the time that we have over the next kind of few weeks or months to kind of to really learn and kind of and understand the traffic better. There's other things as well. So I mean, we're also hearing anecdotally from some kind of partners on the gaming side They're starting to explore kind of new like buying opportunities, such as kind of pre-install. We're also hearing kind of publishers looking at kind of cross promotion in their apps, just to make sure that they kind of keep on top of kind of bring down the kind of churn rates and kind of keep those users within their own ecosystem. So there's lots of things to be kind of testing over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, Paul, same question. What advertisers should do now?
Yeah, so number one, start testing and scaling your SKAdNetwork campaigns now. You're going to be in for a big shock in the next couple of weeks when adoption is at 80% and you've got no learnings on SKAdNetwork. Number two, I'd spend some significant time thinking about how you're going to view the measurement of your SKAdNetwork campaigns versus your MMP track campaigns. Trying to reconcile those two data sets is really quite challenging, and you need to be prepared for that when SKAdNetwork really scales adoption. And then lastly, I think we've touched on this already. Emma mentioned it. Consider spending on new channels. You really want to diversify your risk as much as possible at this point in time. So you want to make sure that you've got a good diversification of channels to ensure that if one goes, starts performing really poorly, you have alternatives there. So there will be 3 suggestions.
Yeah, super interesting. Okay, now moving to the publishing side and maybe ending there. Christian, what do you think publishers should do now?
I think I'll touch upon a point that Paul mentioned in terms of diversification. In times of economic turmoil, what's the 2 things you do as a startup or a $1 billion company? You capitalize on what you're doing in terms of your bread and butter, your UA revenue, but you diversify where your revenue is coming from as well. And whether you use AudioMob, who's a contextually based advertiser or not, or great partners like NumberEight, diversifying and testing and finding those new revenue sources is absolutely key. That multi-layered strategy. For instance, the fact that contextual advertising isn't affected at all by IDFA and changes, it's critically because the CPM getting from that UA advertisers are willing to pay and the revenue you'll get will change, it may decrease, and then it will find stability later. But contextual based audio ad revenue is actually increasing. The lowest we've seen is $5, it goes up to $40. And there's a reason that we're partnering with great data partners like NumberEight. It's because it's not just performance advertisers that are now looking at revenue, it's contextual advertisers that don't need that personal data. They're willing to pay between a $10 and a $40 CPM just to get a brand in the presence of a player in a contextually relevant game. So diversifying your revenue and testing new things is absolutely powerful.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, definitely. And maybe Matt, do you have anything to add there from the publishing mediation side?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really at the moment, while we're in this kind of early phase of iOS 14, it's really still about kind of test for me. So like things like testing the kind of language of your ATT pre-prompts, where you position your ATT prompts. We're seeing a lot of publishers now benefiting from running separate waterfalls for ATT and non-ATT traffic, because obviously they're priced very differently. Also, publishers, if you're not already doing it, they should be considering kind of programmatic mediation, just to kind of avoid some of that complexity around running multiple waterfalls. But yeah, there's all sorts of things as well, like whether it's kind of testing ad frequency, new placements within the games, and as I mentioned before, like starting to explore kind of the idea of like cross promotion, especially when you're talking about hyper casual, where you only have that user for a short amount of time. Maybe it's worth exploring kind of cross promotion across your titles.
Okay, and Emma, anything to add there?
Well, we coined a term called FOMI in the company, and we use it everywhere. One is basically saying first-party data, all device computing, on like ad monetization will be probably impacted. So you need to try new formats. Christian said it best. Diversify your revenue streams, and IDs are going away. The train already left the building. It left the station. We might as well get on it. We can't just we need to embrace it and kind of like figure out something else. We can't just continue to hold on to them.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I'm already getting kind of the messages that we're out of time. Definitely a super interesting topic. a lot to cover. All of our experts are also approachable via LinkedIn, I assume, and kind of probably the conference can provide contacts, so feel free to reach out in case of any additional questions. So thank you, everyone, for being with us today. I think it was super interesting and relevant. Thank you, Emma, Matt, Christian, and Paul for joining us today. Good luck with handling all these changes, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
guys.
much.
Thanks.
Okay.